Fannie Lou Hamer was born in 1917, Mississippi, the youngest of 20 children in a poor sharecropping family. Living under the brutal weight of segregation and systemic racism, Hamer witnessed firsthand the ways in which Black Americans were denied basic rights. But what could have broken her spirit instead ignited a fire within. She became one of the most courageous voices of the civil rights movement, fighting relentlessly for voting rights and equality. Her journey led her to Atlantic City in 1964, where her testimony at the Democratic National Convention changed the course of history and forever altered the national conversation on racial justice. Born into poverty in Sunflower County, Mississippi, Hamer grew up working the fields as a sharecropper, a system that kept Black families in perpetual debt and dependency. As a child, she witnessed the brutality of racism at every turn, whether it was being denied education or witnessing the constant threats to her family and community. Despite these hardships, Hamer found strength in her deep sense of justice. Her first brush with the deeply entrenched disenfranchisement of Black Americans came in 1962, when she attempted to register to vote. After being turned away and harassed, she faced the added punishment of being evicted from her home. But this only solidified her resolve. Instead of retreating in fear, she joined the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee and began organizing for the right to vote, fighting not only for herself but for hundreds of thousands of disenfranchised Black Mississippians. By 1964, Hamer's commitment to change had led her to become a leader in the Mississippi Democratic Party. This alternative political party was formed as a direct challenge to the all-white Mississippi delegation at the Democratic National Convention. The MFDP aimed to give voices to those who had been silenced by voter suppression. During the 1964 Freedom Summer, a grassroots movement to register Black voters in Mississippi, Hamer was on the front lines, often risking her life. She and other activists faced violent threats from white supremacists, yet she continued to organize and educate others. It was in the climate of tension and resistance that Hamer's resolve would be tested in a way she never anticipated. The national spotlight. Her testimony at the 1964 Democratic National Convention in Atlantic City would change the trajectory of the civil rights movement and force the country to confront its treatment of Black Americans. The 1964 Democratic National Convention in Atlantic City became a battleground for civil rights, and Fannie Lou Hamer's testimony became one of its defining moments. Representing the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party, Hamer was asked to testify before the Credentials Committee, which was tasked with deciding which delegation would represent Mississippi at the convention. Hamer's emotional testimony before the committee exposed the appalling violence and voter suppression tactics that were rampant in Mississippi. She spoke of the beatings she endured and the constant threats to her life for daring to assert her right to vote. Her words, "I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired," struck a chord that echoed across the country. Her testimony, broadcast nationally, shocked millions and brought the issue of voter suppression to the forefront of American politics. Though the MFDP was not seated at the official delegation, Hamer's courage in Atlantic City forced a public reckoning. For the first time, the nation was confronted with the realities of racial injustice in the voting process, and it ignited momentum for the Voting Rights Act just 1 year later. Though the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party did not win its bid for official recognition at the convention, Hamer's impact was undeniable. Her testimony in Atlantic City became a rally cry for a civil rights movement, and it played a crucial role in the passage of the Voting Rights Act of 1965, one of the most significant pieces of legislation in American history. This act aimed to eliminate the legal barriers that had kept Black Americans from voting, particularly in the South. Yet Hamer's activism didn't stop with voting rights. She continued to advocate for economic justice, women's rights, and the full inclusion of Black Americans in the political process. Her tireless work on the ground empowered a new generation of activists to fight for their rights, continuing the battle she started in Mississippi. Fannie Lou Hamer's legacy is one of resilience, courage, and unwavering commitment to justice. The moment she stood in Atlantic City demanding that her voice and the voices of Black Americans be heard marked the beginning of lasting change. Today, Atlantic City remains a symbolic place in the ongoing fight for voting rights and equality. Her legacy is just not one of history, it's living and breathing in the moments of today. From protests against voter suppression to the fight for equal representation, Hamer's story continues to inspire. She proved that one person standing against immense odds can change the course of history. Her work reminds us that the struggle for justice is ongoing. Fannie Lou Hamer's life reminds us of the power of one voice in the face of oppression. Her courage in the 1964 Democratic National Convention and her lifelong dedication to justice paved the way for greater equality in America. Today, as we continue to fight voter suppression and inequality, we carry her legacy with us, honoring her by protecting and exercising our right to vote. Her story is a beacon of hope and a call to action, a reminder that the fight for justice is never over.